How did one man steal millions without ever showing a weapon? 3 months before his final arrest, Matthew Cox was planning his next big move, right under the noses of the FBI. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how one of America's most ingenious con artists outsmarted the system, and how law enforcement finally caught up. Timestamp 0:30 section. The rise of a master manipulator. Matthew Cox seemed like anyone else. Born in Tampa, raised in a typical middle-class family, but even in his teens, people noticed something different. He lied as easily as he breathed. In the late 1990s, Cox became a licensed mortgage broker. If you bought a home in Florida in the early 2000s, chances are you used paperwork he helped design. But his big break, learning how banks, desperate to hand out loans, often skipped basic checks.
That loophole would make Matthew Cox a millionaire. 1999. Desperate to make more money, Cox started forging signatures and inventing fake buyers. Straw buyers, real people lending their names for a cut. By the time banks figured out what was happening, he'd already pocketed their cash. In 2001, one of his fake buyers, Lisa Davis, walked away with a mortgage she knew she'd never pay back. Banks chalked it up to bad luck, but Cox was just warming up. Few-minute cliffhanger, but what he did next took scams from local to nationwide and nearly untraceable. Timestamp 2:00 section. Laying the trap. Blueprint for scam. By 2002, Cox's schemes spanned the South. His weapon wasn't violence. It was paperwork, psychology, and pixel-perfect forged documents. He'd locate distressed properties, overinflate their value, and use complicit insiders to get loans approved under fake name. Cox and his small crew ran dozens of identities simultaneously. Sometimes, he'd even impersonate his own buyers, showing up in disguise to sign closing documents. The mortgage industry, blinded by profit, demanded no proof beyond paperwork. The scam: buy a derelict house for $40,000, forge an appraisal for $250,000, secure a massive mortgage, then disappear before the bank suspects a thing. Cox pocketed the difference. Multiply by dozens of properties, and you can see how the trail of fake loans sprawled through city after city. Investigators estimate that between 2002 and 2004, Cox's crew stole over $12 million. But what happened next changed everything, because the FBI finally caught a break. Timestamp 4:00 section. Dangerous turns. Pursuit and betrayal. In spring 2004, a routine audit flagged a cluster of foreclosures across Georgia and Texas, all with eerily similar paperwork. The FBI launched Operation Paper Phantom, but Cox was a ghost. He changed birth dates, social security numbers, even surgically altered his appearance. It wasn't just banks at risk now. Some of Cox's own partners began to fear for their safety. The pressure mounted and the stress shattered alliances. In late 2004, his longtime girlfriend, Rebecca Hawk, agreed to testify against him in exchange for a deal. But the FBI needed hard evidence, the kind only forensic document analysis and a risky undercover operation could provide. Here's where it gets interesting. Criminal profilers noted that Cox's handwriting would morph depending on which identity he was using. That detail broke open the timeline of his scams. Few-minute cliffhanger, but the real surprise came when Cox tried to disappear entirely. Timestamp 6:00 section. The fall, capture, and consequences. After almost 2 years on the run, spanning over 10 states and dozens of aliases, the FBI finally tracked Cox to a rental in Atlanta. His mistake: using an old alias to rent an apartment, triggering a red flag in a national database. Agents staged a morning raid. Cox didn't resist. He later told reporters he was relieved it was over. But here's the kicker: the full extent of his fraud was only discovered after his arrest. FBI analysis showed he'd created over 50 false identities and stolen at least $16 million from banks and investors. His scams tanked local housing markets, leaving ghost neighborhoods behind. Cox was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators got deals for their testimony. The banks, for their part, overhauled their background checks and loan policy, but the damage was done. Timestamp 7:00 section. Lessons from a criminal genius. Law enforcement now studies Cox's psychological profile in criminal justice programs across the U.S. His blend of charm, cunning, and technical skill represents a new breed of financial criminal. Even in 2026, with biometrics and AI-powered identity protection, echoes of Cox's methods still influence scammers today. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We post stories like this every day, and you don't want to miss the next one. But the real surprise is coming, because Cox is petitioning for early release, and some claim he's working with cybersecurity firms to expose new financial threats. Will authorities take that risk? Or is history doomed to repeat? If you like this, watch our next video, The Untold Heist That Bankrupted a City. Subscribe and hit the bell. We drop new true crime content every single day. The next story is even crazier.